I am Marcel Kurpershoek. I'm an Arabist specialized in Bedouin poetry. I worked many years as a diplomat for the Netherlands, as an ambassador at the latter part of my career in many countries. And then my last job was a special envoy for Syria, also because I'm an Arabist. And then I came straight to Abu Dhabi, to New York University, to continue my work on collecting and registering and explaining and translating this Bedouin poetry. My heart always went out to the desert, and that's why I started studying Arabic. Of course, at first, when I got a chance, I got myself posted to Saudi Arabia, and there I got to meet the Bedouin. I worked in the embassy, but fortunately at that time the embassy closed at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So then after Asr prayers, I would go to the Anasim area of Riyadh, where the Bedouins live, and I learned their language. And at the end of my stay, I got special permission from King Fahd to go on my own and for 4 months do explorations in the desert. I took my tape recorder and I found that at that time, which does not exist anymore, many poets who still compose poetry in the way I learned it at university in Leiden, as they did it 2,000 years ago. They are illiterate, but they are very cultured. You know, it's an oral culture. There is no contradiction between not being able to read and write and being very cultured. So this is the essence of the old Bedouin culture. That's a very important element of my research here, to connect the ancient poetry with contemporary Bedouin culture, which can teach us much about the old, as the old can teach us much about the present. So this started more than 20 years, or maybe almost 30 years ago. And many of the people I used to know then still know me, and I keep in contact. And even when I left Saudi Arabia, I kept going back for my books to do additional, I had always so many questions. And when I published my first book, 1994, with Brill, translation, Arabic text and glossaries on Dindan was his name. Dindan actually is an onomatopoeia. It means Yedendin. He was always singing and humming to himself, making poetry. When I used to go back, I found that he was still alive, that there were many poems I did not record before. So in another volume, so it continues, you know, it's accumulation. I think we are talking about not the modern nation states we see now here. I think it's appropriate to call the area Arabia in the old sense. I'm very attached to 19th century or early 20th century travel literature. There were so many great scholar travelers, you know, who went there and discovered. So all these people, they traveled not to a country, they traveled to Arabia. And that includes current Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Oman, Kuwait, some parts of even more northern countries like Jordan, for instance, the desert areas of Syria and Iraq. Actually, I met some Bedouin and they defined the area by saying from where they trekked with their. It extends from, you could say, the Indian Ocean shore of Oman to the mountains of Anatolia. You know, where the desert meets the mountainous areas of Anatolia and of Iran. So that's cultural Arabia, and there you have many of the same Bedouin tribes. They speak the same language, they have the same culture. For instance, here in the United Arab Emirates, you have many poems about seafaring and pearl diving, and you know, here is where the sea meets the desert, but also they have many things in common. There are variations in dialect. So this is Arabia, you know, and all the countries here, they are very proud of that heritage, and they try to collect as much information as they can. And I think NYU AD is playing a very crucial role there, you know, to connect the past with the present. And this is especially important because, as I said, it is an oral culture. You know, a lot of this Some has been jotted down on papers, kept in private archives with families, with tribes, because of course that's very important for them, and they can share it with other people, and then you create a huge warehouse of heritage, actually, which needs to be systematized, which needs to be explored, to be researched, to be put in easily accessible books, so that future generations actually know where they come from. First thing I wanted to do after leaving the service is write the books that I did not have time to write so far. So this is why the fellowship came at exactly the right moment, because now I've written 2 books for the Library of Arabic Literature. Last year I was offered to make a television series on my research with, among the Bedouins, first in the Nafud Desert in the north. And that could not have happened without NYUAD here, and gave me the opportunity to go there and to spend 1 month, and before that a lot of other research trips to do, prepare for this television series. And now this series itself, it opens the door next week. I'm going to the empty quarter to film with the Al Murra tribe, in an area that is shared very much between Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Oman, and Qatar. You could say, this tribe is spread in the whole. The general theme, which is now my passion, and that is to establish a very clear and obvious and documented connection between modern Arabian culture and the pre-oil culture, you could say, and the classical times, which started in the year 500, and I think it ends about the year 800, when the Abbasid caliphs took over in Baghdad, before you had the Umayyad caliphs in Damascus, who were basically also Bedouin oriented. And of course, in the time before that, you had the poetry, they call it Mukhadram, the poets who lived both in pre-Islamic and Islamic times, and you have the Jahili, the ancient pre-Islamic poets. So you talk about a period from 500 to 800. Then the desert culture kind of went underwater and emerged again in the year with the Nabati poetry. We didn't mention that word yet, but it's now called Nabati poetry in the year around 1400, 1500.